Hello, everybody, and welcome to Sight and Sound Breakdown, episode number 1. That is actually episode number 2.
This is gonna get so confusing.
Immediately regret that episode 0 thing. It's going to haunt us for forever. Episode 19, actually episode number 20, but it's fine. It says 1 in the thumbnail. If you haven't watched episode 0, go back. That's actually our first episode. That was a lot of fun. We covered some of the movies that did not quite make the list, but today we actually start to crack the top 100. Before we do that, let me introduce our panel. My first co-host coming back, must have liked the first time, Payson Johnson. What do you think about this run of movies today and getting started cracking the top 100?
I just want to say, shout out to Vince McMahon, who in 2009 called the 25th WrestleMania the 25th anniversary of WrestleMania, because that's how counting works, and no one backstage wanted to correct him. But I'm actually super excited. A couple movies I've seen before, a couple movies I had never seen before, one that I don't think I'd ever heard of. So, super excited to talk about this list of movies, especially with this awesome panel we have.
All right, and right below me is my other illustrious co-host, Andrew James Barr. Andrew, we're really start getting in the meat of it today. How are you feeling about it?
I wasn't expecting a Vince McMahon reference for this particular set of films, because if there's one movie I know Vince McMahon really loved, it's The General.
And joining us today, I know I announced last episode that it would be Amru. Amru had some stuff. He couldn't make it today. We're going to try and get him back on as soon as possible. But thankfully, willing to hop on last second, we got Adelaide Spence. Adelaide, thank you for coming in last minute. I know you had to cram these kind of quick, but how are you feeling overall about reviewing these movies today?
I am so excited to be on the show. About the movies, we can get to it later. I do want to ask Payson, which one didn't you know beforehand? Because I feel like I'm the rare kind of person who, when I got added to the green room, I was like, oh hell yeah, I get to watch the Pitch-a-Pong movie. Which I don't know who else would fucking say those words.
Brag.
Yeah, that was the one I did not know. I had seen the director's name before, and I had always been like, hey, that would be a funny thing to ask someone for 4 points to name this director of this movie. But that's about it.
Like right when I got into movies, Cemetery of Splendor kind of like little baby blew up. I'm like, oh, okay, I gotta remember this name. So he's been there, and I finally got to check that off the list today.
That's fair.
Well, when we get there, you will be responsible for pronouncing the director's name.
All right, I'm gonna see you guys next week.
But okay, so we do have 5 movies today. We are starting into the top 100. As we briefly discussed last episode, a lot of ties. Everything's a tie. Today we are we don't have all number 95s. I think it's a 6 or 7 way tie. But today we have 5 movies tied for number 5. So we're going to go in chronological order. We're going to start out with 1926's The General, directed by Buster Keaton and Clyde Bruckman. This is an American movie. On the 2010 list or 2012 list, it had been number 34, so dropping down here a little bit to 95. But silent classic, The General. I saw this movie for the first time probably about 5, 6, 7 years ago. One of my first, really, when I started getting into like trying to catch up on silent movies, and I just loved it. I was really impressed with what kind of a modern feel to it, like how it really felt like a modern take towards filmmaking, where you really kind of just commit. And I think that's what Buster Keaton obviously is known for, is his commitment to his films. And
yeah, he's a crazy man.
Insane. And you definitely see that here. In general, what were your guys' thoughts of The General?
So this is the second time I had seen this movie. And the first time I was like, okay, yeah, it's good. It's like, I don't know why it kind of like had slowed down towards the middle for me. It went up on rewatch for me. However, it did kind of start to slow down at the battle scene, which is weird because that's not the scene that it should feel like it's slowing down. But I do really appreciate and I love this movie. I think it's just really good storytelling. You've got a very likable main character. And first of all, the cinematography in this is really great for the time. there are some shots that are actually like genuinely like really impressive and really nice to look at. The score is great, which if you're a silent film and your score is not good, then good luck to you. So it's literally just a movie where it's just really solid, especially for its time.
Yeah,
That's my thoughts.
this is the third time I've seen this movie. I've actually seen a lot of Buster Keaton movies. Part of it is because in community college, when I did a fight choreography class, we were all assigned like a different stunt coordinator, and I was assigned Buster Keaton. And also, I watched a bunch of them when Blank Check, shout out to the best, one of the best podcasts, covered Buster Keaton. And yeah, I've always just been super impressed by this film. I think it's fun when you look at it in the scheme of Buster Keaton's like directorial efforts. Like he had done Three Ages, Our Hospitality, Sherlock Jr., which is probably my favorite film of his. And going to this movie, this was definitely like the biggest production he had ever mounted at the time. And when you watch it, it feels like epic, especially for a silent film. And I really do just think like watching this movie again, of like the three main silent film stars of Chaplin, Keaton, and Harold Lloyd, Buster Keaton is always just the one I found the most entertaining because I love his just absolute just like deadpan delivery of just his face, how he'll do the craziest thing and he won't have a single reaction on his face, while like Chaplin and like we'll try to be like super happy go lucky. I've always loved how just like Keaton is just like, no, it's about the stunts, it's about just watching it, and I'm just going to do this as lifeless as possible, and I've always found that super entertaining. Compared to a lot of his movies, it has a... Go ahead.
Have you ever heard like the backstory of why he does like the stone face?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because his parents were like circus performers, and literally they would like juggle him as like a 4-year-old. And they found that the audience just thought it was better when he had like zero reaction to being thrown back and forth between a whole group of people, which is crazy. Everything about this man, just backstory wise, crazy.
Oh yeah, learning that he performed in vaudeville, I think, is one of the least shocking things in the world. And then yeah, just all the stunts, all the like visual humor of this. Yeah, this is a movie I've always really loved. There's definitely some things to talk about in a 2025 like set of eyes, which I'm sure we're going to talk about. But yeah, I'm a big fan of this movie.
Notoriously, I don't like silent movies. This is the 5th one I've seen, however, so the pattern is not super proven. It was kind of proven a little by this movie. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with it. I'm not sitting here saying like, oh, it's bad. I think it's a medium that doesn't entirely work for me, especially when, bless you, a lot of the best gags I think were already kind of revealed to me. And it's not like, oh, have you heard about this? I've seen them in full. I have seen like 2-minute clips of the movie over and over and over, where I don't think they work better in context. I'm actually shocked how good the story is, considering it is kind of pro-Confederacy. But like the actual storytelling of it and making his wife this like, I don't know how to phrase this, like not like an object, but like she is propelling the narrative. It's not just forgotten
damsel
about.
In distress syndrome.
Yeah. I think the scene where he like breaks into the Union's dinner party or whatever, and he's seeing her through the hole, perfect. I loved the actual. I love early Hollywood. Like, how do you make this work with such limited technology? I think that's really fascinating. But I think there's not a lot for me to connect to as the film goes on. I did write. I think one of the, and I think I forget if it was before the episode started filming. Bar, you were talking about how. I know it was literally just like a few minutes ago. The back half of this is where you kind of lose it, where it gets to the battle scenes. I don't disagree with you. I think it's where I was more interested in the story being told, but it has the one genuinely great gag that I did not know about beforehand, where he's like signaling to his man, like, yes, kill that man. And as he does that, the cannon fires, but his sword just breaks and it ends up just stabbing the dude anyways. Perfect. Fantastic. But I think the whole medium is what loses it for me. I think there's enough going on that I can't fully connect, but I get why it works for everybody else. I'm just a child.
So we were talking about this before you hopped on, actually. So I've never done this before. It's the first time I've ever done this for a movie. It's the only time I've ever watched a movie on my phone. And for some reason, I'm kind of realizing that silent films may be the absolute best medium when it comes to film to actually watch on your phone. Because of like the aspect ratio and just the fact that it's such a visual thing that you're holding it like as close as you can, like to your face. I find that like next time, give that a shot. It may work.
I watch most movies on my phone nowadays because that's just how my schedule works out. Which I know Stanley Kubrick just died in a fucking his phone.
David Lynch
I think-
just died this year, Spence. Have some respect.
I watch Blue Velvet on my phone. 4 stars. I think for me, I disagree in the sense of, and part of it's just because I do so much shit that my notifications are always going off. I think a silent film is worse on my phone.
That's why you gotta
There's
mute
something-
that
it's
though.
distractions constantly, and it's like, but I can't like check there, go to somewhere else, because so much will happen if I look away. It's the same reason that like I made sure to watch foreign films on my computer, on my TV, whatever. Because if I look away, I miss so much. I miss so much going on. I'll watch Star Wars on my phone. I won't miss shit.
All right, whatever.
Yeah, I'll say counterpoint. The first time I saw this movie ever was in the theater. I got to see this on the big screen. And I think it does add to it. I mean, I understand your point totally, Bar, what you're saying, but I think this movie, maybe silent movies in general, but this movie specifically, because of just, and what I love about this movie is like the pacing, the momentum of it. And I've always compared this to Fury Road. I feel like this is like the first version of Fury Road.
Oh, 100%.
Because basically once it starts moving, it doesn't stop. Like this movie is constantly in motion. And I love that about it. I think it's so exciting. You know, you don't think about a 1926 Buster Keaton movie being exciting, but I think there's a lot there just because there's constant movement, there's constantly something happening, there's constantly some kind of action, and I just think that's so much fun to watch. I think it's a lot. I really enjoyed seeing it on the big screen because I think you just get the full feel of that constant motion, that perpetual motion that's going on when you see it on the big screen.
It helps that, as I alluded to before, that Buster Keaton is an absolute crazy person, and literally did all these stunts in like real time and like on an actual moving train. Like, there's just something about that always translates so much better to a big screen like that.
Scene where he's literally holding the train back with the log in his hands, just like trying to make it stop, is just so much fun. Like it's definitely one of the smaller stunts, but just one of the visual gags I just love is when he's first told that he can't join the army, and then he just goes and sits on the like spork of the train, and then the train just starts moving, and he just goes up and down and up. And if you watch his face, it takes him like 3 times going up and down before he's finally like notices. And that is why I always just love Keaton's humor so much with all these silent films. And I just think this is a great culmination of everything.
The gag that got me the most was when he has put his love into like a sack in order to like, hide her. And he throws her into the cargo of the train, and then suddenly you start seeing bigger and bigger things start getting brought in to be thrown onto the same one.
Yeah, to what Pace was saying too, just with his style and his comedy. We talked about the Marx Brothers last week. I said how the Marx Brothers, it's like you take like a stereotypical 20s or 30s movies and you throw these cartoon characters in it just to cause chaos. And I feel like Keaton's the opposite, where he's very much a silent era dramatic character that gets unwittingly thrown in this ridiculous situation, and watching his reactions, watching just his face as he tries to comprehend what's going on. Cause it feels like everything's always one step ahead of him, and he's just trying to keep up, and you're keeping up with him. And I think that's so much fun to watch. I think that really leads to the humor, even though that deadpan, I think a lot of people think that I've read things that kind of gets old after a while, just that one facial expression, but just him constantly with that trying to figure out what's going on around him is a lot of fun.
Just curious, did you guys watch, did the version of the movie you guys watch, was it in black and white or was it in a sepia tone?
I think mine was more sepia tone.
More sepia tone.
I think mine was black and white. Mine was black and white.
Yeah. I watched mine on the Criterion Channel, and I was surprised that it was remastered in black and white. And watching this again, I was like, man, I do kind of like prefer the like old style sepia tone look, just because it's like set in Civil War time, so it feels even more old timey. But like with it being on the Criterion, obviously
Especially in the South.
Yeah, honestly, and we may as well get to that sooner rather than later. With the sepia tone, I think it just captures like that old fashioned look. But with it being on the Criterion Channel, restoration still looks great.
It does, yeah, you're right.
Whenever I watch like an older movie on like Amazon Prime, it's always like a coin flip whether the black and white restoration is going to look good. Usually on the Criterion Channel, I'll always say it almost. I've never been like soured by a restoration on the Criterion Channel.
I will say, even though I'm not the highest on the movie, it did get me kind of more interested in more Buster Keaton. I think part of it is just like he's a very pretty man. Like I enjoy watching him act between like just generally good facial structure. But like you say, like he like this fundamental understanding of physical comedy. He has full control of his body, of his face. Like he knows that like a 5% change to his performance fully makes a joke better or worse. And I think it makes me more interested in seeing what else he does, and maybe a movie that I don't understand, that I don't know of quite as thoroughly.
I think you should watch Sherlock Jr. personally.
Yeah, Sherlock Jr. and Cameraman are probably the two I would highly recommend the most.
I don't know if it's still going on, but they did a re-release of Sherlock Jr. very recently, and I don't know if it missed me yet, but I was going to look into that.
Yeah, definitely worth checking out. I'd say too, just like in general, the filmmaking really surprised me as well. Like the actual, like we talked about cinematography, the scene where he's on top of the train and he's riding past the battle, the incoming soldiers.
Yeah,
I watched that. I'm like, that's rare projection. That's definitely rare projection.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I went and looked, and that's in camera. Like there's actually like an army moving behind him while he's moving on that camera. And what he actually did was he it's the same group of extras. He put people in blue coats and had them charge one direction, and then he put them on gray coats and had them go the other direction. But it's all real. It's all actually happening, which is just nuts for the time. And just thinking about, like, I'd love to see, like, obviously it doesn't exist, but like behind the scenes footage of how they got that tracking shot with the train.
Yeah,
because they're just on it the whole time. I just think is pretty phenomenal that they were able to do that in 26.
This is one of those movies in general that because Hollywood loves to make movies about making movies. This is one in general that I feel like I would love to see like a movie version of the making of.
That's why I was watching something like, how have we not gotten a Buster Keaton biopic yet? Like, that's just crazy to me.
Yeah, because I guess the closest thing I think we've had is Chaplin, but like, yeah, it's funny that we've never gone back to that era, and like, yeah, and I just think that's part of the fun with watching silent movies is like barely anything is faked. Like probably the most famous stunt Keaton did is the house is the house stunt in Steamboat Jr. where the house like falls on him, and it's like if he takes like two steps to any direction, he is dead. Like his career's over right there, and the fact that we pulled that off. Fascinating.
There's like a parallel universe where we're very unfortunate that he just didn't become like a physicist and like do some crazy amazing thing, because the mathematical like measurements that you would have to make in order to make that happen and be as safe as he was is crazy.
Well, I mean, same with the house collapsing. The scene with him on the train with the rails and him hitting that one to bounce it off, like he had to do that in real time, and he was sitting on front of a moving train, and if he didn't hit it perfectly, the train would have derailed with him hanging off the front of it, so that would not have ended well for him at all, and he just did it.
It could have just even like went the opposite direction and hit him square on.
A lot of bad ways for that to go.
Yeah.
I looked into it.
Oh, go ahead, Spence.
I looked into it. The re-release that I was talking about, it's part of this program called Silent Synced.
Okay.
They synced it with a bunch of like random REM music, and then their previous version was they did the original Nosferatu synced with the Radiohead's Amnesiac and Kid A album.
I've always
So-
wondered how that's going to work.
That's interesting.
I wanted to try it. Kind of happy I didn't because it's a little weird, but
Yeah.
when
I just think this is just so much fun. Whenever the Union soldiers show up, and it sounds like the music from Super Mario RPG or like Peter and the Wolf. Why did Super Mario RPG come to my head first before Peter and the Wolf? But like just like this like and like these like evil Union soldiers. I just think that's super fun. Obviously, with me saying the evil Union soldiers, I may as well just say what the plot of this movie is. This is about a train conductor that wants to join the military, is turned away, and then his train gets stolen. He said, "I'm going to go rescue this train." Unfortunately, Buster Keaton decide to make our protagonist want to join the Confederate Army. Not really told from like it would honestly bother me more if it was portraying like either side is like these like super heroic people, but they're all kind of bumbling. But yeah.
So that's one of my two theories on this. I didn't do any research into this, so this is just my assumption. Theory one of why they decided to make his character want to join the Confederacy instead of the opposite way around is because he's still kind of a bumbling character.
Yeah.
Like it still kind of makes the Confederacy look silly. In fact, they're more bumbling than the Union looks in this film. If you think about it. Theory number two is when they do the night shots. My theory is that so in that scene he has to be wearing the enemy uniform in order to sneak in. So
That's
my
really
theory is that in that kind of blue filter, the blue uniform looked better on screen than a gray uniform would in that filter. So those two things in mind, I think they were just not only story choices but stylistic.
Mm-hmm. And what I read too was that I think basically because I think this was based on a novel or some kind of story, and it was originally a Union soldier, but he said he switched. One of the reasons he switched it was because like his character had to be the underdog, and the Confederacy lost. And I mean, this is a time frame where a lot of these people who were in that war are still alive. Not maybe a lot, but some.
Well,
so and who know that. So I think it was
probably
just
got spooked by the witchcraft of movie pictures.
But yeah, they had to duck from the train. But no, I think that was part of the logic, so to speak, was that like he had to be on the losing side for that like underdog story to make more sense, I guess.
Yeah, like I want to be clear, like it would bother me a lot more if this was like some like Nation's Pride, like Triumph of the Will-esque propaganda film. But
opening of Gone with the Wind.
Yeah, but if you watch this movie, you can very clearly tell it's so not that. And Buster Keaton was much more concerned with, I want to make a funny movie. I want to make this like rip-roaring adventure. Like ending is a little weird that like you might be expecting him to turn and like join the Union at one point, but yeah, for me personally, it does not detract from the film, especially considering this movie came out in 1926. Like, I think we can relax a little.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel the same way. Like, I mean, 1926 we didn't even be talking about this, but yeah. And I feel like it doesn't like praise this. It's not like you said, like you mentioned, Gone with the Wind. Like, it's not like, oh man, the South is awesome and so many good things about the South, and too bad the South lost. Like, there's none of that in this movie at all. It's just two sides of an army that the story happens to be taking place. So I'm in the same boat with you, Payson. Like, I mean, obviously you notice that you can't not, but it's not something where it's super offensive, where it's in your face, and they're like making it hard to watch.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Did anybody else have anything else they want to cover for the general?
I think
generally.
Really. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna. All right. Have a great night. I'm gonna end this. No, I'm kidding.
All right. Well, what I'll do now that we're in the top 100, what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask this question on every movie, and I'll go around. Pace, I'll start with you. Is this a movie you would, if you were submitting a ballot, is this a movie that you might consider putting on your ballot? And beyond that, do you feel it deserves a spot in the top 100?
I probably wouldn't put it on my ballot. I do think Keaton, while this is easily his biggest movie, I think there are just certain films that he made that are better, which I know we'll be talking about later. And with that being said, I don't necessarily have an issue with it being on the list because it is just such a triumph of filmmaking. I understand it being here, especially this low on the list.
Spence, how about you?
I'm going to say no with a caveat. I think that I am too uneducated in silent film to have a perspective about like what is the best. I do think since it's like, the birth of cinema, something should be there to represent it. I think if I were more educated, I could speak more about like, oh, this should be in there, or this is what this movie specifically is lacking from like the history, the halls of cinema. So no, but there is probably something that does this job better that could inform me more about why I feel a certain way about this movie.
Fair enough. Bar, your thoughts?
It would not be on my ballot. However, I think it deserves its spot on the list, and I think 95 is a good spot for it. Somewhere in like the 80 to 100 range.
Sure. And I'm right there with you. Like, I wouldn't put it in my top 10, but I'm definitely glad it's on the list. I think it belongs here. As Ellie was saying, it's a very much a like kind of formative movie for Hollywood. And there's other. I think there's at least. I know there's at least one Chaplin. There might be two on the list overall. So I mean, like this era gets represented further down. But I think you have to put just everything that Keaton did here. Like from a filmmaking standpoint,
it
has
super
to be acknowledged. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I definitely think it belongs in the top 100. So. We will move on to our second movie of the night, also tied for 95. Again, going in chronological order, we are going 1965's Black Girl. And I'm going to try to pronounce the director's name.
It is directed. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Jump on that grenade.
By Weemain Sembeng.
All right.
Yeah, sounds right. I took one semester of French. That sounds pretty good.
Yeah. So, and this is a story. This is a movie about a African woman who is living in, I believe, Senegal, and she goes to work for a French family who lives there. They take her back to France, and things do not go well for her. It's a short movie. It's only about 65 minutes, and it's really just focuses on more or less her day-to-day life and what she's going through in this position as a servant in this household. So I will leave it to the panel just to get your opening thoughts on this movie in general.
I'll go first on this one. This is one that I had vaguely heard of, but I had never seen before. And it's always fun when you go to watch like a super old movie and you see it's not only short, it's like less than an hour long. And I was not aware that this was a French film before I saw it. Watching it, it absolutely feels that way because it does feel very French New Wave. And while I don't love it as much as some of the other French New Wave films, like as much as I love Breathless or as much as I love like Alphaville, I was pleasantly surprised, and I did really just enjoy just like seeing the life of our titular character.
I think this movie is pretty good. I like what it's trying to do. I like a lot of the ideas that it has. The performances in this movie are all fantastic from the three main performers. It looks great. It really did kind of get on my nerves, though, because a lot of it got super repetitive in the story. Like, they would say something, and then 15 minutes later, it would be just the same thing, and it would kind of create... And then, like, something like different would pop up, like the letter from her mother, even though she says it's not actually from her mother. And then it would just go back to, I hate this bitch, I hate this place, why is, And not to say that I can't understand or empathize in the moment, because as I said, I think the idea of the story is great. I just the execution got kind of repetitive.
I am kind of in the exact same camp you are. I think for me, it comes down to the use of narration basically as the skeleton for the movie. And I understand its purpose is there is a clear language divide between, as I pull the character back up, Gomi and her bosses, whatever the term would be, I guess. I understand that there is a purpose to it, but I think that being said, it kind of takes me out of the film, where I think what makes it work and what I think why it is held in such esteem makes it less interesting as a viewer, if that makes sense. It is just, it's a little difficult for me to fully commit, even though the themes for me are so resonant and are so clear.
Like, the theme is super important, and it's told in a lens that we don't normally see, which is something I really like about the movie. Like, the whole plot of her being told that she's basically going to be taking care of the kids. She rarely sees the kids. It was kind of, if we're being kind of honest, it's kind of like a pimp job, the way she got picked up as a maid. And like, you know, the mistreatment, of course, like this Karen ass bitch. Obviously just
The family
wanted
worked for it just garbage. Like, let's just say
Oh,
that. Yeah.
she is an atrocious person. The husband's not that bad, even though it kind of is for letting it continue on. And like, obviously, her more wanting someone to boss around and feel like they're being. This and Get Out are actually kind of close in theme of, oh, well, we've got this black person, aren't we cultured? But it literally does just come down to the fact that we keep hearing the exact same thing in the narration. As good as I don't remember the main actress's name. As good as her performance is,
Imbecine Therese Diop.
Thank you. As good as her performance is, I think it's limited by the script and just the fact that it just keeps. It's the same thing. It's this woman's a bitch. This woman is being abused. This woman's feeling terrible about the fact that she's locked in this one little apartment. Repeat, repeat, repeat.
I understand where you're coming from. The reason why that wasn't as big a problem for me is the length. I mean, if you do that an hour 45-minute movie, I'm going to jump off a bridge, but 65 minutes I could handle that. Also, I think that's where, for lack of a better term, the horror comes from. Is just she's almost kind of locked in this purgatory of the same thing. She's just stuck in this cycle and she can't get out. So I think that was the purpose of that repetition. And I understand what you're saying. It narratively it may not work as well, but I think that was the purpose of it. As far as the narration, I didn't mind that because I felt that was just reflecting her voicelessness, where you actually hear her like words come out of her mouth very rarely in this movie. And even when you mentioned the part where she gets a letter from her mother, her one boss is like, okay, we're going to respond, and he just starts writing the letter for her, and you're like, she has no voice. And I think that's what that narration really emphasized. As far as the filmmaking goes, I agree with Payson. Like, I really love that French New Wave kind of feel to it. I love the way, like, just the visuals, like thematically, how visuals, like how literally white everything is around her.
Oh.
You know, the buildings, the people, the wardrobe, the wall, everything around her is white. She is just so like the other in every sense of the word
Like
in this movie.
Like,
Yeah,
it is
so
definitely the only way to make her seem out of place.
just so like, and that just kind of adds to her discomfort. So, I enjoyed it. I agree with Bar. Like, it wasn't by any means a perfect movie, but I love the fact and we'll talk about the ending in a minute here. Until you get to the ending, I like the fact that there was no great statement. You know, the statement was her experience. She was like, this is her daily life. That was the statement the movie was making. And I appreciate that more than if it had been tried to like over dramatize it to where, you know, the boss, the woman that she works for is a bad person, but she's not evil. You know, she's not purposely trying to ruin her life or destroy her or she doesn't have some like nefarious racist plot against her. She's just a bad person, you know, and I really appreciate that about the movie.
For like,
I think, go ahead.
For like 50 minutes, you're really just watching like throughout the Happen France. You're just watching microaggression upon microaggression, just like backhanded racism, and like it starts to get annoying. And like I think Kirk just brought up a really great point of like, if this was a longer movie, I probably would have gotten a lot more tired of it. But because it is so short, I'm like, yeah, I can totally get behind this.
I think there's also I'm trying to think of a way to put it. I love the duality of her hair throughout the film. I think that her hair throughout the film is such an amazing little touch that I really, really loved. Because a lot of the times when she's around the family, it's very stylized to fit that area of the world. Whereas when she's alone, it does beckon more towards Senegal, which I think was a really smart and really creative touch to this film.
I want to backtrack a little bit because I think one of the reasons, and I think we'll get to this more when Kirk asked his question about where it falls. I think a big disparity that's going to come up a lot more as you guys get further into the show is the increasing prevalence of both like stories from Black filmmakers and stories about Black women have historically like not been the most mainstream. So I think this is a very clear example, as well as like obviously Jeanne Dielman like cracking out of fucking nowhere #1 spot, and Daughters of the Dust having like this big mainstream push as we get more and more modern. I think this is a story that is so inherently Black and also so inherently female that it does draw that kind of interest of, as we break into this, it feels so special because we truly aren't telling these types of stories.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not even like us, as like we're going to do it more when we get into Get Out, is we have a bit more perspective about like an African-American experience, is that we've been exposed so much to it. This is not only like an African experience, but also like a French African experience from Senegal. There is so much here that I think the reason why it resonates and why it cracked the top 100 is it truly feels unique. And the story is told in a way like Kirk really leaned into that we can understand in such a short amount of time. I think that a lot of it is really well done. I wish I liked it more. I do. Again, I think the form is part of the problem. The heavy leaning on the narration really takes it out of me as a form of like entertainment. As a piece of art, I think I really respect it and I really like what it's doing. It just doesn't come together quite so well.
Sure. Yeah, that makes total sense. It does. I do want to talk about the ending, and we're going to go to a spoiler section here for the ending. Does anybody have anything else before we go on to that?
No.
Okay, and I forgot to mention at the beginning of the show. Last week, our last episode, I said we were going to have timestamps for the spoilers in the description. Those never got there, so hopefully nobody had anything really spoiled for that conversation. What we're going to do moving forward is we will have these banners up as we're talking about spoilers. If you see this and you don't want anything ruined, either just mute us while that's up, or skip fast forward past it till it's gone. But when you see that, we're talking spoilers, so beware. So the ending of this movie really is what took me out of it. Because as I said, I really appreciated the fact that we were just getting a person's experience. It wasn't overly dramatized. It wasn't overly, it wasn't overly, not to say this in a negative way, but overly cinematic, where it's like, oh, this is some great story of, of this person's life. It's just this big epic story. It's just what this woman's go through, and it's horrible. And that's what makes it worse, is just her experience. When we get to this ending and she kills herself, what I honestly thought that what I took that as is the filmmaker not having enough confidence in the story they told.
Yeah,
and kind of feeling like I need to really, bring something to drive this home. Where I think if the ending had been just her continuing this life, that would have been so much more, like, it would have been less shocking, but in a lot of ways more devastating, where she was just trapped in that. You know what I mean? So I think, to me, that just took me. What did you guys think about that?
Well, that kind of leads. I didn't want to say too much when I was giving my opinions earlier, but I think that absolutely hurt it. Just to have this whole repetitive script, only for it to come to an ending that I felt was kind of, as you kind of alluded to, I don't know where to go with this kind of ending. It's definitely effective and it's definitely powerful. It does just kind of feel like, until you get to the actual ending where everyone's kind of like passing up on the money that the dad comes and tries to give to the mom. I think that ending, like if she had run away, and then he comes to Senegal and does that, I think that may have actually worked a little bit better. Because he's like, well, I got to give the money to somebody, and no one there wants it.
Thinking about the ending, it definitely did just kind of come out of nowhere for me, and I just feel like it did just like bring the movie to a weirdly like abrupt ending and like raise the stakes of a movie that I think was doing a really great job at of us just witnessing like this life situation of this character that isn't in like this great circumstances, but we're just like watching this as the viewer. Weirdly, the movie I was thinking about in the ending was have you guys seen Roma?
Yeah.
I'm
wild, but
I'm thinking about how that movie ends, where like throughout the majority of the film is this really like quiet and melodic film. We're just watching this like maid help out this family, and by the end, like we're witnessing this riot. We see our main character give birth, and like during this riot, and it seems like the stakes are like super huge, and we're like, holy crud, is this really like where we're gonna end it? But I think where that movie succeeds in ending it with on the beach, and you seeing how the main character's family has been affected by this small group surrounding her. I don't think this movie really had that like final concluding note to make it all seem worth it, if that makes sense.
Sure.
I definitely understand that, because I think this movie is trying to balance these ideas of, like, I think I understand the reasoning for it from a writing perspective of, this is basically the utmost act of pessimism. This is truly inescapable. I can't run away. I can't do any better. I'm trapped here forever. And this was her only solution. Again, it comes into that thing where I think, like, I understand where it's coming from, but it doesn't really work for me as a viewer. And I think part of it is, it's hard to believe that it is that, not totemic. There is such totality to that decision, that this is truly it, and that she is fully trapped. I think there are better options as a person in the real world. I think the movie does frame it as inescapable, but I think logistically there are other options, and I think it would make more sense if the filmmaker fully described why those other options wouldn't work.
Yeah.
I will
Yeah.
say, before we started, I did talk to Amaru a little bit beforehand because this is one of the ones that he had seen, and he was very like staunchly like, no, fuck this. This is the one reason this movie does not work,
Hmm.
and I do understand it. I think how it fully ends though, and like the symbolism of the mask of, I think this does
I
bring it
love this mask though.
the final ending with the mask of being basically chased by it, and to them it's being like haunted by like true Africanism of the mask. I think that the symbolism is beautiful in its perfection. I wish they did something else with her though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we would rise so much in my estimation.
Yeah, you really did a good job of expressing how I felt, Spence. Like you said, like there's nothing in the movie. Like there's no. I mean, we've all worked crap jobs, and we've all been felt
Yeah.
like where do I go from here? Like I think that's a kind of a universal experience. But to get to suicide from that, I mean, obviously it happens. Obviously people do it, but there's nothing. It's not set up in the movie where there's. I don't like. She seems like a pretty strong person. There's nothing. I didn't get that sense of hope. Like she was angry, but I didn't get that hopelessness from her where she was just going to completely give up like that. And maybe if they had built that more into the character, and it was a little more of a payoff, then that would make more sense. But like I said, I feel like it was just like, well, we need a big shock at the end of the movie, and this is how we're going to do it.
Like I think her performance definitely helps,
Mhm.
It does. Yes,
but the script doesn't.
Yeah.
that's fair.
All right. Did anybody else have anything else they want to cover on Black Girl?
Nothing like for white people to
Yeah.
really bring this down.
I didn't want to make
Wait
the
till the
joke.
last movie we can really.
Yeah. Okay. So, Bor, I will start with you this time. Your thoughts on this movie as being on a ballot and on the list in general.
It would make neither for me. I understand its importance. Like, the message in it is really important. I think that there are a lot of metaphorical elements that are great. The performances are fantastic. It just does not come together at the end, unfortunately. It just does not stick the landing well. And I think that's its biggest downfall.
Spence, how about you?
This would not make my ballot. However, if we were a voting body and we were like, hey, all these ones are tied, let's start ranking, let's put them somewhere, this would be high for me. I think that like while not all of it works, most of it is still so strong that I do really respect what it's going for, as well as this like burgeoning voice in cinema. I think it is really powerful and really engaging. It's one of those things where I think because it's made like 56 years ago, whatever, how the fucking math works. 60? Oh my god, I'm old. I think where there are like evolutions in narrative storytelling, which would make the movie better nowadays. I think a lot of classic films sort of have that issue, and as like a product of its time, I'm still really engaged with the story that it's telling.
Basin?
Yeah, probably in the same camp as Bar and Spence, where this would not make my list, and I wouldn't put this on the top 100. This is going to sound harsh, but I got to look at this as the top 100 greatest films of all time. I'm going to be saying that a lot, where I'm like, yeah, I think it's a really good movie. I don't think it's better than the one. There have been a lot of movies out there. There have been more than a couple hundred, like, absolutely impeccable films. I don't think this makes it for me.
Yeah.
Like, I just want to clarify real quick. Like, it's still like a 3.5 out of 5 for me.
Yeah.
It's still a very good movie.
Oh yeah.
But
no, I feel the same way, and if like Spence brought up at the beginning, like just a big theme of this list here is just telling different stories and things like that. And if we were doing like top 100 stories that should be told, this would be on
Oh,
the list.
100%.
Obviously.
Oh yeah, 100%.
But I again, a good movie. Again, there's as a film, I think there's a lot here. But yeah, it wouldn't crack my top 100 either. So I think we're all kind of in agreement in there. So we will move on to the third movie on the list tonight, tied for number 95. How about that?
What?
1968's Once Upon a Time in the West, directed by Sergio Leone. This was also on the 2012 list at number 78, so another one that dropped down a little bit, but still cracked the top 100. I'll start on this one. This is the second time I've seen it. Really went up for me on this rewatch. I don't know if it's because I've seen more Leone movies between in the span between, but I just love the way this movie looks and feels. From that opening, 10-15 minutes at the train station, I feel like this is just like concentric short films like happening. Like I feel like that train station section is a short film in of itself, and then certain moments within that are its own shorter film. You know, the guy
going to meeting Frank at Sweetwater, and it's just like, oh my god, yeah.
Well, one of the better opening scenes I've seen for the first time recently. Like it's kind of perfect.
Yeah. And I got to talk about the cast. Like, I just love the people in this movie.
Oh,
like the look.
so good.
Just seeing. I love anytime Woody Strode shows up. You know, you're in for something good. And then the other guy, I'm blanking on his name, but the guy with the eye. The older guy. With the fly. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Just
Paula Stappa.
Yeah. And just the faces these guys have, and just like holding on the long close-ups on them, like you never see that. Like if they made this movie today, that would be like Austin Butler and Timothée Chalamet. Like you never see people who look like that in movies anymore, and I just love it. Like just like every like little like just crease and craggle on their face, and just that thing with that taking its time with Strode with the water hitting his hat, and then him drinking off of it, and the guy with the gun and the fly. Just like so many great moments, and then just that build up to that shootout, and then it goes from there. And then like it kind of just becomes another movie where it's like about that family, and that's like its own little short film. So I just really was impressed by this. It does drag for me a little bit. That's the biggest downside for me is that once it gets past, like once you're introduced to the characters and everything, and the story as a whole kind of starts, that drags for me a little bit. But the first, last half hour, 45 minutes are fantastic.
Yeah, I love the vibes of this movie. Mm-hmm. And the introductions to everybody are amazing. Like when you first meet Harmonica, just at that train station, that one's already great. But at the bar, when you just hear, first of all, the actual harmonica tune is perfect. Like it sets the mood so well. But the moment that what's his name? Cheyenne. The moment Cheyenne like lifts the lamp up to him, and you just see those piercing blue eyes that Charles Bronson has, and he's playing it, it's just one of the best like shots of a character I've ever seen. I love a lot of first of all, I think, what's her name? Claudine Cardinal.
Really good.
The fact that she wasn't in like bigger stuff in general, aside from like Pink Panther, I think, crazy to me because she's amazing in this film. Her screen presence alone is just off the charts. And I'm a huge sucker for Jason Robards. He's becoming one of my favorite actors in general because just the little choices that he makes are so good. Just like this film is just absolutely got a bunch of magnetic performances. I'm with Kirk though. You do feel the length after a while. I think that I feel like there are little moments of this film where, excuse me.
What?
Thank you.
Bless you.
where if you just kind of like snipped off like maybe 5 minutes of it in little moments, then you don't really lose much. But when it comes to just how this movie feels, how it looks, how it just comes across, it's super impressive, and the story itself is really smart. It's really sharp. It's one of the best reveals of what the dead person did with his money. In a lot of films would just be like, well, it's in diamonds, or oh well, he buried it in this location. What they do with this one, I think it's just super smart.
I'm going to add to what you said, but not just kind of 5 minutes here and there. After the opening scene of the family dies, checked out immediately. Like, it's me. It's nearly 3 hours, and it's a Western, but I got bad news for you. I don't like Fistful of Dollars, and I don't like Good, Bad, the Ugly. I haven't seen $2 More, but it's just, I don't think Sergio was like one of my guys. So this was a fucking struggle to get through. I will say, though, despite all of my reservations about the movie, Henry Fonda giving like one of the best performances I've seen this year. Like, dude is locked the fuck in. I adore what he's able to go through. I think as well, yeah, seeing him as well a few months ago for the first time watching The Wrong Man, like I truly saw like disparagingly different performances from here when I like barely knew the dude. So seeing him here like locked in, fantastic. This is probably my favorite Ennio Morricone score, which I know is one of the top 2. But I think it really enhanced the vibes of everything. Really, I think despite my issues with, I don't like the genre, didn't care for the story. I didn't really like Jill as a character. She felt treated kind of weirdly.
Yeah.
There's enough about it where like I get it. I get why people like this. I understand it. But fucking Christ, is it not for me?
I will say about Fonda, though, I mean, has there ever been like a more cast against type casting?
Yeah, I was about to say the more anti-Fonda kind of role.
I raise you, Tom Cruise and Tropic Thunder. Perfect.
But I mean, for Fonda doing something so far outside of the range you usually see him in, I mean, Elliot, you nailed it. He is just completely there, and he is that character. And it's hard to watch because, if you know Henry Fonda at all for anything else he's done, he's like always the best guy. And to see him just come in and immediately start murdering children,
hell yeah.
that's tough to take.
No, Spence said this wasn't for them. That's okay. I'll love it enough for all 4 of us because I absolutely adored this movie with every fiber of my being. Yeah, just talking about what Kirk said, that reveal that Henry Fonda is going to be your villain when the family at Sweetwater is just living their life, all the outlaws just come, they start gunning down this family, and then you see from the side profile, it starts from the back of his head, and then it just pans over to seeing his face. Like, I was just thinking, like, if there was a moment I could go back to in cinema, I would love to time travel back to 1968 just to see, like, an audience's reaction to seeing that, to seeing this person that they have, like, been with for so long, and just, like Kirk said, like, in 12 Angry Men, this is, like, the ultimate righteous figure, and just seeing him just now as, like, this, like, shining, like the like, epitome of evil. Like, there's a moment where he's on the train, and he kicks someone out, and he literally, like, pull-up bars on the train, and, like, jump kicks them, and I'm just like, dude, this guy's a badass, holy shit, but, like, he's just so evil. And just, like, from minute 1, and it's not just, like, the sound effect, the like, sound editing of that opening with, like, the water coming down, and, like, the creak of the rocking chair, but, like, the second we see those opening credits, and just how they just, like, cut in on the screen, and, force edit out, I'm just like, I am already locked in. Yes, I understand you guys saying that in, like, the second act it starts to drag a little. I think for me, I loved the characters so much that I was just sort of locked in. Like, I would genuinely put Bronson, Fonda, and Robards in the same league as Eastwood, Wallach, and Van Cleef in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Like, I think that trifecta of actors are just so good. And just like the end, like we will definitely talk about this in spoilers. The final flashback and realizing why he called himself Harmonica, one of my favorite scenes I've seen in a long time. And yeah, the score by Ennio Morricone, just legendary. Like I'm one of those weirdos that loves his score for The Untouchables. Like I know for a lot of people they say that score takes them out. I think that's a really fun score, but yeah, Ennio Morricone is one of my favorites, and I absolutely loved this movie.
I'm with you. Actually, love the Untouchable score.
The one, you mentioned something about the Frank's reveal. I think one of the scenes I love the most is when they first show up at Sweetwater, him and his gang. Just the way, I mean, I rewound this and watched this like 4 times to try and figure out exactly what's happening. The way they all just literally come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Like, they're just looking, and like you just see like the landscape, and then just all of a sudden they're there, and they're just all shadow, and how the crickets, like the bugs and everything, stop making noise, like completely right before they show up. I love that. It's something about Leone movies, and I think just because a lot of it has to do with the fact that it's like it's in America, but it's really not. And there's like kind of that cognitive distance with that. And I've always felt like he created kind of like an old West version of Middle Earth, where it was like there's something like otherworldly about it. And I just love how much that scene and that character captures that, where it feels like it's quite not of this earth.
Yes and no to that. Definitely with the other movies in the Dollar trilogy, I completely agree with you. I think those feel a little bit more heightened and a little bit more like high spirited. Looking more into this, I discovered that Leone really wanted to make a more grounded Western, which is why this one definitely seems a lot slower than those other 3 previous films. He apparently didn't want to make another Western after making that trilogy, and the only reason he decided to do it was because they said, hey, you get to work with Henry Fonda, and he's like, well, that's my favorite actor, so sure, I'll do it. And I just think that's super cool.
So I had a question. I'm trying to educate myself, but I didn't get to finish it. So I'm wondering, because Payson, you mentioned it earlier, like the reveal of Henry Fonda being the killer. I wonder. I had the trailer pulled up, and they seem to hide it pretty well, because like the whole story about like Terminator 2's marketing is they never revealed that Arnold was the hero of the movie, and like Jason Patrick plot twist, the police officer is the bad guy. Do you think they did the same thing? Because from what I'm seeing, there's a chance, and that is the moment where I think it'd be a lot more riveting. It's like if you travel back to 67, to be said, I forget what the fuck.
68.
68 when it came out.
In the theater, and it's like, oh my god, who killed this whole family? Oh, I bet it's that motherfucker.
Charles Bronson.
Thank you, Christ, I'm tired. Yeah, and then you pan up, and it's the steely, blue-eyed Henry Fonda. And just the popcorn hits the ground. I wish I could be there.
Yeah.
So, fun fact, actually, I was gonna save this for like the afterthoughts. You know who also really loved that scene and felt that way?
Who?
Isaac Hayes, who was so impacted by this film, he actually wrote one of his best songs, "Walk On By." After that scene in particular, which is crazy because if you listen to Walk On By, if you listen to that song and then you see that scene, it matches up and makes so much sense.
I'm going to listen to this song later, absolutely.
We need a commercial break to air the song in the next movie.
And I'm just looking to see if I can find anything on that, Spence.
I
yeah,
like the 2 minutes in the trailer, and it maybe suggested it, but generally you don't see him hold a gun besides like staring off into the distance. Like it's well hidden.
And that opening scene is so crazy because I'm watching it, and he kills all the members of the family, but he leaves the kid, and I'm just thinking like, okay, I think I know where this is gonna go.
I love this moment.
No, and I'm just like, okay, so he's probably gonna leave the kid alive, and it's gonna be like this revenge story. We're gonna go in the future, and then he just murders.
Yeah.
So what do you want to do, Frank? Well, now that you used my real name, bam.
Yeah. Oh.
Perfect opening scene. Like,
Yeah.
No matter reservations, that is how you start a movie.
Oh yeah. I also love the fact that Frank's at the beginning of it at least, he's kind of the underling
Mhm.
of the guy on the train. I don't remember his name, unfortunately, but I love what they do with him with his character, because you kind of see that he's this unfortunate, kind of pathetic figure, and you know that it's only going to be a matter of time before Frank completely. I'm not going to spoil it, but should we
No,
just
yeah,
talk about spoilers?
yeah.
We can get spoilers. That's fine.
Kirk, are we good to?
Yeah, we can get spoilers. That's fine.
So
Go ahead,
yeah, like you just kind of see how much of a pathetic guy this guy is, with the tuberculosis, having to deal with like the tuberculosis just kind of completely ripping through his body, and you know that Frank is just waiting for the moment to turn the tables on him, and he's too late.
Yeah.
He comes by too late to actually do it.
Yeah, and I love that character too. I just love his little like arc of how he wants to see the Pacific Ocean and how they work at it into like even like his ending, like when he's at that puddle. And that's just a really nice little touch. The dynamic there, and the fact that like for a very short time in the movie, Frank kind of stops being the bad guy and is slightly sympathetic. After an hour and 15 minutes ago, he murdered a family and small children, and like just the way they kind of turn the tables on that, I think is really fascinating, and just one of those things like I don't think you'd see these days.
I think everyone has talked about how like great the final duel is in the town. The dude hiding behind the clock and like I think puns kind of undermines it, but I think the quips about it. I think it makes it something really entertaining. But far and away, my best little like action beat in the movie is on the fight on the train. He's like peering out. It's like, oh my god, I think someone's coming down. I can get him. And he's hiding his gun in his fucking boot and nails him.
Yeah.
What a great
cinema.
Pure cinema.
Like a hidden camera, just a hidden gun.
So I was alluding to this earlier. I love the fact that like this money that everybody is looking for has all been put into basically just lumber and signs and stuff to build a town near the railroad. I think that is such a great idea for that to be the reveal, because I've seen great reveals of like where the actual real money is before. I've seen it like Charade does a really good job of doing this. But when you realize the money that's going to be coming through this, incredible storytelling. And when when the characters find out what's happening, it sets more plot into motion. It's not oh well, that's interesting, like little detail. It legit moves the story forward, and I love when a movie can do something like that.
That is something I think is so fascinating with this movie. Like when it comes to the Western genre, this one isn't really like reinventing the wheel by any means, and in regards to the way of like Unforgiven does it. I just think it perfects it and just makes it so interesting. Like the motivation of Harmonica for why he's tracking down Frank. When we finally realize that, it's like, okay, he wronged Harmonica in the past and killed his brother. Like, okay, that's like not the most shocking thing. But then when you realize why he's named Harmonica, and it's just shot in such a cool way and just like such a dramatic way of just watching Frank walk up to Harmonica and just put the thing in his mouth and finally realize that like and just getting the character motivation of like, I'm gonna hold on to this every day of my life until I finally track this guy down. And then with that award, and Sergio Leone is so good at visual storytelling. Just watching Frank finally connect the dots, and like the reading I got there is Frank has not let too many people live in his career as an outlaw, and I think just this moment when he's finally realizing like, the one guy I let live is now the person that is going to be my undoing. And that is one of my favorite tropes. Like I always called it the Benny Blanco trope, If you've seen Carlito's Way, where like one small mistake ends up being your ultimate undoing.
I thought you were talking about the musician for a second, and I was like, "What the fuck are you connecting this to?"
I really great scene. Really great scene.
I love to connect it just real quick to connect it to that. I love how like every time Frank is like, "What's your name?" He instead of giving like his real name, he just gives the name of one of his victims.
Yeah.
And you still don't learn his name by the end of the film, really. Because I think he does give a name at one point, but even then, I think you're kind of like, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
And I think that the final shootout there, I think that rivals Good, the Bad, and the Ugly between the two of them.
100%.
I mean, again, that shot of Frank where he's standing with the sun behind him, and he is just a complete silhouette. And then them just coming in, and the score on there is so good. I think we touched briefly on the score, but I think this is like one of. I mean, I'm not an expert; I haven't heard them all, but as far as I know, one of Morricone's like more like traditional scores.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it doesn't have like a lot of those like those things you're used to hearing in a Morricone score where it's a little like, oh, this is very like kind of like modern Western kind of feel like he has. Like I think
it fits the feeling of the movie where it just feels a little bit more grounded.
Yeah, and I feel that, and it's in that scene, in that shootout, and also in the scene with the train baron when he dies at the water, and he's like he's face to face with that puddle, and I just love that so much because like they have the sound of the waves crashing, and the score for that is so good. And I love, just like I said, I just love the fact they wrap that guy's up. That there's no you could just made him like a nameless bad guy and just killed him off. And I thought about the fact that they took the time to wrap up his arc. I thought was really cool.
Absolutely.
All right.
Anybody have anything else they want to add to this one before we move on? Okay. I'll start with this one. I struggled with the question as to whether or not this wouldn't be a Western I put on my top 10 list. And before I went into this, having watched it before, I thought, no, this isn't what I put on top 100, just because I think like I like Leone's movies better, other movies of his better. But I feel like this might be one that deserves a spot. Like Payson said, I think there's just something a little different to this that I think if we're going to pick something. And there's not I meant to go through and look. There's not a ton of Westerns on the top 100. Maybe a few, but nothing significant. So I think there definitely needs to be some representation. And I don't know if this would be, maybe between this and a couple others, but I have no problem with this being on the top 100. Spence, I think we know your feelings on this, but we'll go to you next.
No. I'm fine with less Westerns. Hot take. It's not for me. I'm not going to slander anyone for liking it, but it is. I think the only Western that I like deeply love is Blazing Saddles, which is not the one you'd think I would pick. Actually, no, that and Shane. Shane, those are the two. That is the
I would expect Shane, but
dude, Shane's so good.
It is a good movie. Bar, how about you?
As much as I praised this movie while we've been talking about it, I would not vote for it, and I would not have it on the top 100, honestly. If it has to be on here, being tied at 95, sure. I think that there are other Westerns that are better. So, I don't know. I would say no.
All right, and Payson.
We heard three opinions. Two people from Pennsylvania, one person who is currently residing in Ohio. I am from Arizona. I am from the heart blood of these types of movies. So I will be the champion of this. Would not make my top 10 list, but I have no issue with this being in the top 100. I think if you were to include a few Westerns here, this is one of the ones I would pick. I love The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. I think watching this, I think I might honestly prefer this one. I just think this is just such a well-done film, and I can't wait to revisit this.
And before we move on, Spence, to answer your question about the marketing, I couldn't find anything other than the trailer, as far as that. But I did find some print ads, and it's all four of their faces, and it just says Claudia Cardellini, Henry Fonda, Charles Bronson, and Jason Robards. It shows all four of them, and it says there were three men in her life: one to take her, one to love her, and one to kill her. And it doesn't say who is who. So
Yeah,
That's such
That
good
is-
marketing.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
that is one of the other things that I did not like about this movie is the scene between her and Henry Fonda. I was like,
Yeah.
why is
Yeah.
this here?
mhm.
Doesn't seem like it fits with literally any of the rest of the film or where these two particular characters would be
No.
going.
No, yeah, it was weird, and I agree with that. That is definitely the one of the scenes I would cut if I had the opportunity. But we will move on to our penultimate movie of the night. Tied at, you guessed it, number 95.
Whoa!
2004's Tropical Melody, but directed by Spence. Go.
Pichapong, We're Cool.
If you can't say it right, say it fast. But but no, that's probably right. So no, good on you. But yeah, from 2004, this is first appearance on the Sight and Sound list. This is a movie in two parts, two generally unconnected stories about. One, it's about a relationship about two men and a soldier and a man he meets on one of his missions. The other one's more of a mystical story, like kind of a folktale. And before we start, Bar, I know you were unable to find this. That is an issue with this movie. It is very difficult to find.
Yeah, because the Martin County, Florida library system doesn't work with either Canopy or Hoopla, which is
That's the fact you don't know one or the other is kind of crazy, but. Yeah, but I don't have. I know it's on Canopy. I only have Hoopla. Fortunately, my library had a physical copy, and I know the rest of us all watch this in perfectly legal ways. So no issues there. But yeah, so Bart, fortunately, I don't think there's a ton of spoilers, so I don't think we're going to spoil anything for you as we
all right.
talk.
Cool.
But I'll open it up to Payson and Adelaide as to their general thoughts on this movie.
Watching this, around 5 minutes, I realized, sweet, one of my favorite subgenres, staring cinema, where two people who are in love with each other just stare at each other. I also know around halfway through, there was a fine line between the staring cinema movies I absolutely adore and the ones that I just don't think quite get there for me. And if I'm being honest, I don't think Here's what I'll say. I really enjoy. I kind of liked the first half. I wasn't super involved in this romance. I was surprised because like the second half is like completely silent. It is like has very little dialogue. I thought this half would have had like a lot more, but really you're just watching these two just like silently fall in love. And I think I personally would have liked maybe a little bit more of juxtaposition where like you would have seen these people like talk more vocally. Like I'm rarely ever the person that's like, I want more dialogue in my film, but I think I could have used that from the first half. But once we get to the second half, I definitely vibe with it a little bit more because I did enjoy this like spiritual movie. This guy like kind of losing his mind and thinking he might be becoming a shaman, but like, is he losing his mind? Is he actually becoming a shaman? So yeah, this was kind of a movie that I think of all of them, I had the hardest time pinning down how I really thought.
So I will say I like the first half more than the second half, which I think is not a shocker if you know me. But this was definitely the biggest struggle of everything to get through, mostly because I watched it basically right before we started. And let me tell you, trying to cram in these movies into like 2 days, rough. This was like, I almost feel like I've contemplated not even giving it a rating on Letterboxd because I could not focus on what was going on, and part of it was foreign film that's very like non-literal, paced weirdly, bad camera quality from the very legal means that I watched it. It was just so much was working against it that I truly like. I want to try and contribute where I can, but I have basically no opinion about it. Besides the fact that, honestly, I wish it was gayer.
I'll say this, and again, we have a long journey ahead of us going through this list, and I'm probably going to say this a lot. these movies, if I watch a movie, just, hey, I turned it on one day, I'm like, oh, this is a pretty good movie. But when you put the qualifier on it of you're watching this is one of the top 100 movies ever made, that kind of obviously puts a different twist on it. I felt like that hurt this movie for me. I think my biggest problem is I kind of fundamentally disagree with the movie's thesis statement, which is basically, we are all wild beasts. And the movie, for me, that kind of colored the whole movie for me. Like, I feel like even the first half, as you're watching this relationship develop and you're watching these people, I feel like the movie itself is kind of disinterested in what's going on. It just doesn't seem to feel like the lives of these people are all that important. If you see, a lot of the camera work is just kind of stagnant. A lot of conversations are either like very quiet or completely muted. You don't even hear. You might see people in the background that just are there but don't matter. And I feel, to me, that colored that first half of the story. So I really couldn't connect with that. I did also enjoy the second half more. And again, that's personal preference. I enjoy that kind of like mystical kind of whatever you want to call it more than love stories. So I'm going to be drawn to that more. And I like the one cool thing they did is they incorporate just a little more explanation. It's basically they're telling a story. Like I said, it's like a folk tale, and they're telling it, coinciding with the actual story in real time. You're watching happen. So it's almost like the folk tale is being retold through the events in the movie, and they incorporate like a lot of artwork, like original artwork that apply to the original story, which I thought was really cool. So yeah, I think that was interesting. But again, like Spence, I'll tell you, I think if you go back and watch a clean copy and really focus, I don't know how much more you're going to get out of it.
I'm a little upset that this is the one that got in, because I think I said at the start of the show that like I knew about him since Cemetery of Splendor, which I heard amazing things about. Mm-hmm. Tied for number 196, they have Uncle Boonmee, which I've also heard amazing things about. Mm-hmm. It's impossible to watch, but I've heard great things about fucking Memoria. This is the one that somehow snuck by me. It's more popular than Cemetery of Splendor, and I never fucking heard of it. And I get it now. I get why I didn't hear about it. I don't know how this is the one that voters were like, you know what? Yeah, this is it. What? What's the story? Yeah. What am I connecting to? I don't understand any part of why this is I almost want to watch Uncle Boonmee out of spite now. Just to be like, no, you guys fucked up, put it higher. But then this is the cover image. Like, what am I getting myself into?
That's a great title, though. I would watch just based on that full title.
I'm down for that.
Yeah.
I am so interested about this dude because he is truly like I think obviously I don't know a lot of Thai cinema. This is like my first Thai film, period. He is like I think the modern voice of it, to my understanding. I wish I got a better introduction because I was so excited. But you didn't even like commit to the gay shit. There is like one really great line, which is like the most popular review on IMDb, which is probably why it stood out to me. But it's the when I gave you the Clash tape, I forgot to give you my heart. You can have it today. If the whole movie's written like that, I am fucking there. 5 stars. Buy the Criterion disc. But it's so fucking boring and uninteresting. You have a talking tiger. Why am I disengaged?
I think Spence is underselling it a little, and I think just something I just love with my movies is when a movie is set in like a city backdrop. I love that like industrial sounding feel, like hearing all like the cars like driving, hearing like the like motors of everything on, hearing like people just walking down. I really love that, and then just getting to the second half, like I love the sounds of the jungle. I love the sounds of nature. And just hearing those, it honestly felt like I was watching like a Terrence Malick film. Obviously, he's one of those filmmakers that's like really obsessed with nature and like the beauty of the world. But yeah, like Kirk is saying, I'm not quite sure how I felt about the theming of it. Something I did gather from what Kirk is saying is, guys, he was married at a very young age. He has no time for romance other than us like broken souls like me and Baller specifically, obviously Spence, also getting married. So just a little bit of context on our first life.
Wow, I somehow got dragged into this still.
Self first for both of us.
Yeah, and I'm sitting here trying to think. Like, I do like. I agree with you, Payson. I do like how the setting. Like, I think Thailand is an interesting place.
Yes.
I've known a lot. Obviously never been there, but I know a lot of people from Thailand, and I just to see like what life, like just what basic life is like there. What it's like to walk through the city and ride the bus and things like that. I thought was interesting, and I think there is some like cultural things that we don't get, like the way the military works.
Mhm.
Because the one guy's in the military, other guy was, and then like I don't understand like how enlistment works, or if you just leave and come back. It's not like he kind of still was in it, so I didn't understand. And I think that had, and there was a lot of things in the story with that, and even like the beginning with the troops in the going through the farmland and everything. I wasn't completely connected to what was happening there. So yeah, I think culturally there's probably some things we're missing as well. All right, so I don't know. Do we have any spoilers for this? I don't think there's really anything to cover spoilers wise.
There's the cow thing. That's the only thing that really stood out to me.
Yeah.
Well, it means
Well,
anything.
I have a question. At the beginning, when they find that body,
Yes.
and it's a human body,
Mm-hmm.
was that supposed to represent a cow? Because like the way they were talking about it and posing with it, like they weren't acting like it was a person. Like, was that supposed to be a cow? Like, they seemed really nonchalant about finding a dead person.
I do think it goes to the theme of the movie of just like it's humans kind of acting like animals.
Okay.
And yeah.
Yeah, because I didn't see. Because at first I thought maybe it was like a military thing, like that's somebody they had killed that was like an enemy. But then when I find out like they're just hunting like an animal that's killing cows, like why they seem so like callous towards that dead. I don't know. But okay, if that is, unless anybody else has anything to add, we can get our. I know, Bar, you're out. I think it's pretty obvious. This would not be my. I would not pick this. I would be interested, like I said, Uncle Bome, who can recall his past lives just based on the title, I think is interesting. I'd like to check that out. I would watch more from the filmmaker, and I'd like to see more Thai cinema in general. But this one just didn't do it for me. Payson?
Yeah, I think something I'm really looking forward to with this series is watching just a ton of movies from different areas of the world I just haven't really explored. But yeah, I'm with you. This would not make my top 10 list, and I don't really think it deserves to be on the top 100 greatest films list.
All right, and Spence, make it official.
I want to talk to people who did put this on their list, because I it's one of the things where I think I am like fundamentally not understanding what the attraction is.
Mm-hmm.
Like I want to break into someone's house and steal their like criterion for this just to read the essay, just like I can understand why this got in over other movies. Like, everything's subjective, but like what?
And I'll be completely honest, when I'm watching, like I'm going into this like, because I'll admit, like there's movies on this list I've seen that I don't like, that I don't think should be here, but I'm going with every movie trying to watch it from the angle of why would someone vote for this? What's the appeal? Why did this make somebody's ballot? And I agree with you, Spence. I just couldn't find it on this one. I feel kind of vindicated. Everybody kind of feels the same way. I was afraid I was going to be on an island here.
I sure do.
All right, so we will move on then to the final film of the night, the newest film. We went in, if you didn't notice, we went in chronological order. Final movie of the night, Tide, number 95, 2017's Get Out, directed by Jordan Peele. And obviously, this is the first opportunity it's had to be on the list, so it is its first appearance. Get Out, I call this for the list an Oasis movie. I feel that we're going to come across these movies where like it's like a lot of like very like obscure art house, non-US, non-English films that people are going to have to get through, and then be like, oh, I know Get Out. So this will
Yeah.
probably be. I think this obviously probably be the movie we're most all familiar with. If what on this watch did anybody think? I know I'm assuming we've all seen it before, probably multiple times. Anything stand out to anybody on this watch through? Anything new you got from it?
I didn't really get much new from it. There are little moments that definitely do click together once you've seen the film before, though, which is something I think a great script should always do when it comes to like this genre of film. One of my first thoughts was, how did I not realize that this family was evil when one of the first sentences out of their mouth, they used the word frocking.
Frocking.
Like, and it immediately just becomes more and more uncomfortable as you meet all of these people. And I mean like uncomfortable in a way where my skin is crawling because I know these people. Not literally, Payson.
Outing himself? We just far?
No. But like, just especially with Allison Williams' character Rose, who, by the way, I don't know how she didn't get a little bit more work after this movie, because she's fantastic. Her, and I'm also going to shout out Marcus Henderson and Betty Gabriel, who play the housemaid and the groundskeeper.
Okay.
Him in particular, that is something I picked up on this time around. His performance, because that interaction was the most uncomfortable I have felt watching a movie in a long ass time. Like, knowing the backstory behind that particular character and then just the interaction in general, it's so unsettling. Like, even when he's talking to like Betty Gabriel's character, being Georgina, at one point she uses the word, like, she says, "I'm sorry for unplugging your cellular phone." And just the choice of the word cellular really dug in the uncomfortableness of the situation at hand. I love a lot of the aspects. There is one scene in this movie that I think should have absolutely just been completely eliminated from the final cut of this film. We'll talk about that later. But I love how Lil, I can never pronounce his name for some reason, and it's so simple.
Lil Rel Howery?
Yeah.
Okay.
His character is like right on the money, but he always just goes a step too far. Like, he's absolutely correct in the situation, but he's wildly wrong at the same time. And you start picking up on like how there's the ongoing joke that like in other horror movies, white people are like clearly seeing that there's something wrong and they don't just leave. And then it kind of happens in here, and Howery's character is basically like, "Motherfucker, do you not see like what's happening here?" I really loved that. There's a lot to this movie that's great. The uncomfortableness just comes from such a natural place, and then it progresses and builds. And I think it's just a fantastic script. Aside from that one scene we'll talk about later.
Yeah, this is like the fourth time I've seen this film. Actually, Spence, you look like you wanted to say something before I go in.
I just wanted to add to the caveat that, like, with the time crunch, this is the only movie that I did not get a chance to rewatch. However, it is in my top 100, so I will be here to say positive things the whole time.
Yeah, this is like my fourth time watching this, and yeah, I continue to absolutely love this movie. Something I think that is just super fun about this movie, I think just shows how smart the script is and just how much effort Jordan Peele put into specifically the character of Chris, main character played by Daniel Kaluuya, is I think a deal breaker in a lot of horror movies is often like is how much are we willing to let our main character get away with doing dumb things that put them in this perspective. Kirk always has a really great point of view of like, hey, look, at the end of the day, sometimes they're in just like an act of peril. Like you have to excuse certain things. And I usually try to look at horror movies like that. But still, there are certain moments where I'm just like, come on, what are we doing? I think this movie does a great job of always of like, even when Chris like gets himself into this circumstance, you're not like, dude, what are you doing? How did you get there? Because like the only person that's really telling him to get out is his best friend, who, like Barr says, is taking it into, like, is always just too far and is always like jumping to the worst possible scenario. So from Chris's perspective, he's always like, okay, come on, that's probably not too like that's not too big of a deal. One of my favorite scenes is the first scene where him and Rose get pulled over and the cop asks to see Chris's ID. Even though Chris wasn't driving. And Chris is immediately like, yeah, sure, I'll show you my ID. But then Rose is immediately the one that like gets on the defensive of like, hey, why do you want to see his ID? He wasn't even driving. The cops are trying to say like, hey, this is protocol. And like, I'm not sure if we're supposed to take it as whether like Chris is just like, yeah, fine, I'll just show him the ID. It's no big deal. Or whether like, hey, I've done this before. Yeah, it sucks. Maybe the cop is racist, but like, whatever, I'm gonna show the path of least resistance. But I think it shows that like Chris is the one that's trying to be like super nonchalant about everything. And then when we do get to the end of the movie, and then when we do get to the end of the movie where we see, hey, everything has been wrong and all the suspicions of Rod was correct. And when Chris finally needs to get out, get out of the house and get back home.
Yeah, he said the name of the movie. Yeah.
Roll credits.
Any stupid decisions, always like thinking like one step ahead of all these villains. And I think it's because, and I think the movie did a great job of showing these villains aren't like these like geniuses that like in no way can be outsmarted. And I specifically think the way Chris kills every single one of the family is really smart and really inventive. Like the scene I always love is when he is killing the brother, when the brother's choking him out and you think he's gonna die, and like the second time he lifts his leg, he's finally like, I know exactly how I'm gonna get him. And when he lifts it for the third time, just stabbing the knife in the leg, and you're just like, let's go. Watching this again, I genuinely think the final 20 minutes of this movie is some of the most satisfying of any horror movie ever.
Yeah, I agree with you, Pace. I think you brought up a good point. Like, I think really something that moves this movie along, and they do a really good job of showing you, is that Chris kind of just accepts that being around a big group of white people is going to be weird and uncomfortable. And and it speaks to the experience where it's like, okay, there are things we just have to put up with, and he's used to putting up with it, and he's just, it's fine. I love this girl. This is just something I have to do. So all that weirdness, like you said, that could be, when you go back and watch the movie, that's obviously a red flag. All that weirdness, he's kind of just brushing off as, okay, this is just white people being white people, and I have to tolerate it because that's just how things are. And when it finally turns, you see it. But I think that's a really good point that if he was a little more paranoid or a little more on guard, things may have gone down differently. But he, again, and it's a great commentary because this is just what we have to deal with.
I think that's part of our life. I think that kind of leads into why I wouldn't say that she's like my favorite character, but I think that she's actually maybe, aside from Chris, the character that's easily the best written. I think Rose just does a really good job of lowering that because of her building up the way how weird her family is. Mm-hmm. Like, I think he deals with it because he's already used to it. Yes, absolutely. but B, her basically saying all this stuff of like, oh my God, I hate like how my parents like, interact with black people, how my dad's going to tell you that he would have voted for Obama a third time and things like that. She's lowering his guard even more throughout that moment. And there's just so many little things that her character does that you realize, not to get too spoilery before the spoiler chat, but you realize what she's doing around the same time that Chris does when it's too late.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do we need to put up the spoiler warning for this one? I feel like most people have seen it, but at the same time, if we want to be respectful, I totally get it.
We might as well, because I mean, I think most people will be able to ignore it, but just in case, we'll be consistent.
What I just want to say is the great part about the reveal isn't the fact that the family is evil. I think it's the fact that Rose is in on it. And that's what makes that ending so much. That like third act twist so crazy when she does pull out those keys, and you're finally like, "Fuck, she was in on it too." And you realize you truly realize how screwed Chris is in this scenario.
Well, I think you kind of realize it when you see the pictures in that box.
Yeah,
especially the picture of her with Georgina.
Mm-hmm.
When I saw that movie, I was thinking. Like when I saw this in the theater for the first time, I was just thinking like, are they hypnotizing Rose as well? Like that's where my mind was going. Like
my mind didn't even go there.
Okay, fair. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Rewatching, I was honest. I'm sitting. I'm like, how did I not know she was like? As soon as you find out something's going on, how did we not know? Because like honestly, like how could she not be in on it? The way she brought him there and everything going on, like it'd be really difficult for her not to be.
Oh, the party is on the same day every year?
Yeah.
Oh my God, really?
No. It's so dumb. I hate it. But yeah. Spence, I think you had something to say?
Yeah. I think the thing that made me fall in love with the movie for the first time, which obviously got a lot of criticism when it came out, but right after the movie came out, Jordan Peele did like a kind of interview-ish thing with Vanity Fair with people just on Reddit. Basically just being like, here's what I think this means in the movie. And it does this. Is this symbolism real or not? And some of it he like debunked, but a lot of it is true. And I think I'm just like, wait, this is like kind of densely brilliant where every little bit of the movie is thought through. And I do think like kind of spoilery with
we're in spoilers.
Yeah,
we're in spoilers.
Allison Williams is just giving like, I think that she's good. She's not exemplary. But she has, I think, maybe my favorite performance in a single scene of the whole decade, where she is able to give this like thoroughly emotional, heartbreaking, sobbing phone call, stone-faced.
Oh,
it is horrifying. It is fucking terrifying. And every single time, it's like there's a spider inside my body crawling on my spine. I am so disgusted at how good she is giving that performance.
No, easily my favorite part of her performance is at the end when like Chris is like, okay, first off the moment where you think that like Chris might be counseling her at the end where she's been shot, and you're like, shit, is he really gonna let her off easy? And then he just starts slowly choking, and you're like, no. But like the moment I love is when she's getting choked, and then she finally has this look of like, you people, you I'm speaking of her character of like, you people are all the same, and it's like, oh holy shit, this woman is a psychopath. And that moment is just incredible.
I mean, anybody who eats cereal like that is a psychopath.
But it's little things like that, and I think Payson got into it earlier about like how every member of the family are killed in the way that they kind of like mock Chris as well, and it plays into that. And then the thing that always stood out for me, which took this movie from, oh, I really like this, to sitting with it and saying, is this, as we'll get into it, one of the greatest movies of all time? What makes it belong here? And it's the fact that after he's hypnotized and he's tied up in the basement, the things that he uses to like cover his ears are cotton.
Yeah.
Like that is what it is at the end of the day.
Oh
Jordan
my God.
Peele is so fucking brilliant.
I
think he. Here's the thing. When we're sitting here, and I'm like, yeah, Nope might be his second best movie. No other fucking filmmaker can do that. Where you made 2 perfect movies in 5 years. What the fuck is wrong with you, dude? How are you this good? Like, it's just, I think this is something so special to me about not only like how thoroughly it's thought through, but it's not like it's faltering. It is like it's like Rose's grandfather who can run without stopping because it is genuinely refined perfection. There is I cannot find a fault in this movie's storytelling or in any of its background details.
I've got one.
But yeah, you go first. Bob.
The one scene that I was alluding to earlier. Let me build into this actually, kind of, because this movie's use of cell phones is the best use of cell phones in a horror film I've ever seen. Because there's so many times where it's like, well, why didn't you just use a cell phone in this moment? But like when he's sending the photo of Lakeith Stanfield's character to, I'm going to just use his character name, Lil Rel Howery's Rod. Thank you. Like when he sends that photo to Rod, it's just a great moment of building the stakes because, like, yeah, we know him. There's something about him, and we know that he's different. And then when Rod finally like looks into it and he realizes that he's been missing for about a year, I'm like, oh wow, okay. We're building like the detective work here. And then the fucking police station scene. I hate that scene.
Huh.
I hated that scene so much because of where they take it. Like, it's just a moment that feels like it belongs in a completely different film where they've got like the whole dog and they're trying to be like a little too funny for this moment. And like, But the moment that drives me crazy about that scene is that he's like, I have a picture of this guy that's been missing for a year that was sent super recently. And like, we know him. He doesn't dress like this. He doesn't act like this. Even if you think that the story that sounds silly, I feel like a real cop in that moment would have been like, okay, your story sounds super ridiculous and it's hilarious. But you have a photo of a person that's been missing for a year. We're going to do something about it. It feels so out of place, just this one little scene, that it just completely, it doesn't derail the movie for me, but it's an unwelcome detour. And then you go straight into the scene where he's calling Rose, and I'm like, cool, we're back on track.
See, for me, that just doesn't bother me because I think it just shows how no one is taking Rod seriously. How the cops in that scenario are what we were before we saw everything go down. Like, those cops don't have the context of what we had seen, and I think that just shows that like how ridiculous Rod as a character seems like from an outside perspective.
Well, let's even bring in the context of I think like one of the more famous recent versions of the alternate ending.
Oh
It was shot. What happened? The movie at its pessimistic core, if it was released this way, fundamentally doesn't trust the police system. Mm-hmm. It says that it doesn't matter what's going on. They pull up on Chris and say, "Hey, you killed him. There is no contact. We're not going to believe your backstory. You killed 4 white people, 4 white people.
4 white people and 2 black people.
Yeah, you're fucked." I think that scene kind of sets that up. Of like, yes, it's a ridiculous story. Even with the context, though, we can't believe him.
But it feels so forced and shoehorned in there that I don't think that the comedy works in it. And it kind of just like takes you out of the tone of the film until you literally go into the scene after where you're doing something similar with Rod, where he's doing that detective work.
What the fuck?
Kirk, I have one scene I'm not the biggest fan of, but before we move on, if you want to say something about this scene.
He's a little busy right now. Please come back again later.
I understand what you're saying. It's one of those things where it's like, even going back to Black Girl from earlier, I think there's a disconnect between the authorial intent, what it's trying to say, and its effectiveness. I think it works for me, but I understand why it doesn't work for you. But I do think it makes sense within context.
So,
which I understand. It's just doesn't fit.
One slight moment I'm not the biggest fan of is toward the end of the movie when after Walter has tackled Chris and you think that Walter's about to kill Chris. The moment I never quite understood. So and after Chris breaks Walter out of the trance with the hypnosis, Walter ends up shooting Rose. Is there a reason why Walter shoots himself right there?
Because he knows that he's just going to be reverted back no matter what happens.
Okay, fair. Okay, no, because watching that is the one thing I've always wondered of. I always thought that was just a little too convenient, but if you think that's why, then I think that.
I also think because the mastermind behind all of this is the one that's inside him.
Oh, okay.
He knows that everything can just get rebuilt immediately if he's the one that's still alive.
No, that is fair. I guess my only slight argument against that is, do you think maybe it would have been a good idea to maybe make sure Chris is okay and then do that? But at the same time, it's a movie. You get one major suspension. Yeah, good point. But yeah, Kirk. Essentially, what I was saying is the one scene I've never been the biggest fan of in this movie is right after Walter tackles Chris and after Chris breaks Walter out of the trance using the picture. Walter shoots Rose, and then I always thought it was just kind of weird that he just shoots himself right there. And what Bar said is, well, it makes sense because he knows that if he doesn't kill himself right there, he's just gonna be hypnotized again.
Not even maybe hypnotized, just retaken.
Yeah, I thought the same thing watching this time, and because my thing was I don't know if he knows the whole situation, but obviously the mother's dead, so she can't hypnotize him. So I'm I would at least give him the shot to maybe get to come back or whatever. But I mean, just in the moment and story wise, it's just dramatically, it makes sense for him to just finish it. Just because they set up what a nightmare existence that is.
Oh my God!
For that to happen, so I think it makes sense.
He's probably been in the sunken place for maybe 5 years.
Yeah. So going back to the and I'm sorry I dropped out for a second. Going back to the scene that Bar was talking about, the police station, I actually really like that scene. I understand what you're saying. I think that in context, I understand what you're saying. But I just really like Rod's character. I think Pill does a really good job with the humor. I also just enjoy the police officer he's speaking to. The fact they give her a little personality. A lot of movies. That's what I feel like it's a throwback to me. Because a lot of movies will just be here's somebody will sit a body at that desk, and they'll be there for Rod to fire all his jokes and his one-liners at. And I like the fact that there was some back and forth there. I understand what you're saying. It makes sense that, maybe at that point. And as far as the picture, I think they did a good job of having Rod discredit himself enough that when he brings up the one real point, they're already kind of checked out on his story. And it's irresponsible. They should listen to him, but it's feasible that they wouldn't.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
And I do think that does get to the commentary of the police system Jordan Peele was going to go hardcore at with the final ending. Now, if like Spence said, if you do know what the original ending intended for the movie was, I think the ending we got was the much was easily for me the more superior ending, and I think fit in more with the tone that the movie was going for. Seeing this movie in the theater, genuinely, there are a few times where I've seen a movie where the audience was this locked in, and I still remember at the end of this movie where Chris is on top of Rose about to kill her, and then you just see the police sirens and you see those police lights. The entire audience was like, because we know exactly where this is going with everything. And then the second you see that door that says airport, everyone starts cheering like
motherfucking A.
Yeah. I agree. I thought the exact same thing because I feel like that moment where you see the police lights flashing is enough.
Mhm.
Like just that feeling you get of no, like that makes that just that the movie made you feel that way for a minute makes that statement enough without giving Chris the worst possible ending.
Mhm.
Okay.
All right. Anybody else have any other points to make? It. I will say a couple things I like. I kind of liked how Pill used some tropes in this, like just the scene where the big reveal scene where the family is kind of like he's trying to get out, and when it's like, okay, yeah, something's definitely happening. It's a real quick moment, but the way the mom and dad walk out of the living room and like they're cast in darkness, it just had like a real like old school like zombie vampire movie feel. Like they felt like movie monsters at that moment. I thought that was pretty cool. And I think he has like a lot of cool little like tropes and kind of just playing with the tropes in this movie. You could just tell how much he loves horror movies. All right, I'll start with Bar. Where are you putting this? Are you putting it on the 100?
So it wouldn't make my list. However, I think that it is a very well-deserving movie for this list. So no for personal list, yes overall list.
Payson?
No for personal list. I'm debating overall list because Get Out is one of those movies like it wasn't around during the first iteration of the top or the 2012 iteration. There have been many other iterations before then. But it wasn't around for the 2012 one. But this Get Out seems to be one of those movies of the 2010s that we've just sort of adopted as one of the great films of this decade. And in the same way we've adopted like Parasite and The Social Network, you often see Get Out on that list. It's not as high personally for me, but I get it. I genuinely get it, and I do think it is important to recognize the great recent films that we have put out. So in that context, I do understand it being on the top 100.
I'll let Spence go last. I'll go now. This isn't going to make my list. It's not going to make my personal list. I wouldn't put it in top 100. I think this is a good movie. I do not think it's as great as it's been made out to be over the past 5 or 6 years, however many years. I think, you break it down to things that as a horror movie in and of itself, I think it's good. I think it's really good. One of the greatest of all time, I don't think so. As far as the social commentary that comes with it, with his, obviously one of the most important things about it, this is going to be a super hot take, and I'm going to get flamed for it so bad, but I got to be honest. When it comes to a movie that's going to use genre to comment on, race in America, I think there's a movie that came out around the same time that does it a lot better. Okay. And that's Sorry to Bother You. I think Sorry to Bother You, technically probably not a better movie, but I think it asks more interesting questions. I think it asks more challenging questions. I think it is a lot more subversive than Get Out is. So when a movie that does what Get Out's trying to do better comes out within the same year, it's hard for me to put it on the top 100, put Get Out on the top 100 of all time. So that's my take on it. But
I struggle to say Sorry to Bother You is a better movie than Get Out. That being said, I like Sorry to Bother You more, and I kind of love how messy and angry that film is. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I will admit I do like Sorry to Bother You more than Get Out, and I love Get Out. I just adore Sorry to Bother You, and I think that's a really great take. I don't think you're going to get killed for that take at all.
This I don't know. I apologize if this offends anybody, but I'll be blunt. As a white person, it's a lot more comfortable for me to watch Get Out than it is Sorry to Bother You.
You're not wrong. Oh
Make of
my
that
God.
what you will.
That singing scene at the party. Holy shit! Oh my
Mhm.
gosh.
I have to
So-
rewatch
so-
this. I've seen it before, but I have to rewatch it.
So speaking of white people, Kirk, I'm gonna explain my thoughts to you in a way that every white person loves. A French
Please.
analogy.
White Splain, please go ahead.
Would you have voted for Obama a third time if you could?
Give it a few years, I might have to.
That's,
So,
if you have put 2 black circles on your Facebook page.
Do you use the term "frucking" in place of "fucking"?
We might get this. Might be our final episode. I apologize.
there is a scene in an episode of Friends where Chandler asks Joey, "I have 2 options for you: a naked lady or a big tub of jam. Which one do you want?" And he says, "Put those hands together. Why don't you make 2 beautiful queens fight each other? We can love Get Out and Sorry to Bother You in modern America." I was doing the math over here. In 2022, Multiplex actually made a Sight and Sound list that everyone went through. And the one I submitted, Get Out, was on there. And I made the list of the official Sight and Sound list. 7 of my picks got in. So I think, mathematically speaking, I have the best list. I do think Get Out is like one of the hallmarks of 21st century cinema. I want to say, weirdly enough, Amadeus didn't make the list. What the fuck, British Film Institute?
Crazy.
But no,
Insanity.
this is one of the movies that I remember when I came into I went to college for film. I did not get a degree. I dropped out. But this is one of those movies that I think a lot of professors I met talked about of like in like 10, 15 years when we're thinking about like when we're studying the 2010s, like a decade of cinema, what are the hallmarks? The 2 movies I hear come up the most often are this and Mad Max Fury Road. And I think I am happy to live in that era. I think this is a film that we should all learn from as like a hallmark of modern storytelling.
This one, sure. The other one,
Shut up.
You're just being a hater, Bar. He's playing a flaming guitar. Sick Bar. Shut the fuck up.
All right, Andrew James Barr hates women. Kirk, what are you doing?
All right. Well, I think that brings us to the conclusion of our episode tonight. I want to thank everybody, especially Adelaide Spence, for being here. Just to reiterate, Spence came in very last minute, crammed these movies in, and did a great job of sharing their thoughts with us. So we all appreciate that very much. Andrew and Payson, as always, thank you very much. Is there anything anybody wants to plug or talk about before we cut out?
my other show, The Turntable, on the Like 500 Takes channel. But aside from that, no, not really.
All right. Any other final thoughts or plugs?
Yeah, you'll be seeing some. By this point, you'll already see episodes this year. But Cinemasters Reviews has a new home and is now on this channel, Multiplex Entertainment. I review the newest releases every week, and really happy to be doing it in a new home, same show, just different location. So thank you all.
Nice.
Can I add real quick the other 2 movies that did not make the final BFI list that I had in my personal ballot? Broadcast News and The Incredibles. Slide in my DMs. I will explain why they belong there.
You guys in broadcast news. Oh my god.
It's a good movie, Kirk.
It's a good movie.
Oh my God.
It's a good movie.
It belongs
It
in
is
the
James
halls
L.
of the
Brooks'
Penny
masterpiece.
Marshalls of like this is the hall of how to make the best rom-com possible. This is the echelon. This is the top. It is that and Some Like It Hot are the 2 that you need to study.
Hold on. When Harry Met Sally is like...
We're getting off track. All
All right. Well,
250 rom-coms coming next year to Multiplex.
stay tuned. Maybe what's the AFI 100 years, 100
Laughs.
laughs, 100 heartbreaks,
Oh,
whatever
yeah.
they call it. Maybe we'll do that next. And we'll see what lands on there. But thank you again, all 3 of you. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you everybody for watching. We'll be back next month. Our movies that we'll be covering are A Man Escaped, Parasite, Yi Yi, Ugestu, and the airings of Madam D. We will be joined by Aaron J. to talk about those movies with us. So tune in then. I think it's going to be a really good show, and thank you all for watching.